Is it not working?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Global Public Sociology conversation today, which will be looking at the work that we do in the Ivory Tower and how we engage with our communities outside of this Ivory Tower. And so before we get started on anything else, I'm going to begin with the land acknowledgement for York University. And it is particularly important today, at least I find, in this particular month, as we do this land acknowledgement, to remember women and girls who've been murdered and missing from various indigenous communities around this country, and indeed around many countries in the world. Now, York University recognizes that many indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of the university. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many indigenous nations. The area known as Takaranto has been caretaken by the Ashnabek Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon, One Palm Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. I will now be introducing our speakers to you. These speakers are known to many of you, especially if you are in the Department of Sociology or has passed through the Department of Sociology, or if you, happen to do community engagement work within the area in which at least York University is located, if not Toronto at large. So our speakers today are Professor Lorna Erwin, who is an associate professor and currently the director of the graduate program in sociology here at York University. Since the late 1990s, she's been involved in a wide variety of community engaged projects as a researcher and an activist, essentially trying to use her position in the university to advance educational equity and social justice initiatives. Many of this work has focused on building ethical partnerships with educational and anti-poverty groups in the Jane and Finch community. In this connection, she was a founding member of the UFA Community Projects, the Transition Year Program, the Jane and Finch Social Innovation Hub, while currently she's also a member of the Jane and Finch Community Research Partnership. She also serves on the Success Beyond Limits Board of Directors. Thank you so much, Lorna, and welcome to this conversation today. And thank you also so much for all the work that you have done for this center and for introducing and linking us to various communities in the Jane and Finch neighborhood. We're really looking forward to what you have to share with us today. Mohamed Ahmed is currently the co-executive director of Success Beyond Limits at York University. Mohamed Ahmed is committed to the power of education for young people to transform lives and realize their potential. His dedication to learning is illustrated in his work and in his own life. Mohamed has worked with youth, providing opportunities for in-school support, community engagement, access to mentorship, employment, and exposure opportunities. He has completed his Bachelor of Arts, his Bachelor of Education, and Masters in Education at York University. Having grown up in the Jane and Finch community, a major part of his commitment has been ensuring that systems work in that prioritize the needs of equity and issues of youth from this particular community. And Mohamed has also been a steadfast partner, not just for the RCPS, but I believe for York as well, in terms of facilitating this work and seeing this vision grow. Whenever I think of the Jane and Finch Social Innovation Hub that we host at the center, the one person that comes to mind is Mohamed. So again, thank you so much for your work, Mohamed, and welcome to our conversation today. And our third speaker, Melissa McLetchie, is a PhD student here at York University in our graduate program and the recipient of the 2021 Mary Jo Nadeau Scholar Activist Award. In 2022, Melissa founded Neighborhood Scholar, a nonprofit organization serving East Scarborough and Durham region. The organization is committed to upward socioeconomic mobility in Black and other racialized communities through access to education. Melissa uses her extensive experience as a community advocate and post-secondary student, as well as her sociological knowledge to create programs that empower the lives of youths and young and adults. Melissa, thank you so much also for all of your work, and especially looking forward to hearing about the Neighborhood Scholar program. I know that you do so much more outside of this particular project. And again, I'm also looking forward to the insights that you're going to be sharing with us today. So welcome to all three of you. So we are going to proceed by asking each of our panelists to, within a space of 5 to 7 minutes, very unfair to everyone here, to give us, initial and opening remarks before we then launch into questions. Of course, I have prepared a few questions, some of which appeared in the advertisement, but once they are done with their initial remarks, the floor essentially is open for people to start to engage them, and I will do the moderation from there. So I will start with Lorna, please.
Okay, thank you all. I think I can stay within 5 minutes. I really welcome this opportunity. I think the Center for Public Sociology has been a great resource. They were very welcoming to us, setting up the hub. And I thought I would just give a very brief trajectory of how we got from where we were more than 20 years ago to having the hub at York now, which we see as a great accomplishment. And it wouldn't have happened without, this is really a community-driven effort, as most of the work we've done. So I'm going to be talking about work that I've engaged in, always in a collective. It's never one person, and talking about community engagement. And I'm specifically focusing now on the Jane Finch community. We, as a sociologist of education, I was interested in education and equity, has been a driving force of much of my research. And I was also very active in the union. And after the Harris, some of you probably weren't even born then, but decimated public education, particularly had a devastating effect on communities that were already under-resourced. The Canadian Association for University Professors was hosting something called the Local Hearing for Public Education. Actually, the local hearing was for post-secondary, but we knew at that time from some work we had been doing through a couple of different interventions in Jane and Finch that most of the students from the high school, and in fact, Westview, which you could see from York, didn't even get to post-secondary. So gathering the community to talk about what they wanted in post-secondary, we thought we should just start by doing something we called the Local Hearing on Public Education. And some of the teachers from Westview came. We had groups we were working with helped us organize and spread the word. We thought we would get 20, 25 people. We had well over 100. We had standing room only, and it was the community. It was done at a community center on Jane. The community came to tell us what a terrible community partner York University was, with a list of grievances that were stunning to many of us because we weren't even aware the university was doing this. It was not, they weren't coming to say, gee, this is great, you organized this, let us tell you how you can help us. They were basically coming to say, what are you doing? Are you really doing anything? At that was the beginning of what turned out to be a very fruitful partnership. We got involved in a precursor to Success Beyond Limits, but then Success Beyond Limits. We, I would say, learned so much from groups like Jane Finch Action Against Poverty. The most important lesson I think we took from this is how much we could learn from such a rich and vibrant community, and a community historically oppressed, historically under-resourced, and how another lesson, which was how we use, notions of power and oppression and privilege are central to much of what sociologists do. It informs our frameworks, our methodological practices, but actually learning how these translate in a very hyper-local setting, looking at institutions in Jane and Finch, working with different groups. We slowly, I think, helped repair, but there are still many problems. The university is not a monolith. There's some wonderful people at York that have really done wonderful things with the Center for Community Engagement, which is at Jane and Finch. There's been lots of great work, but as a whole, you really are fighting all the time to make sure to try to leverage the resources that the university has in ways that benefit the community, that benefit the community's social mobilizing efforts. So there's lots there I could talk about. We've been involved in many different, the Transition Year Project, which I think is a good one to talk about because we put months and months, years of work into getting it through Senate. This wasn't directed only at Jane and Finch. It was for students who had dropped out of school, who didn't really have the resources to get into university, and it was about giving them scholarships. We ran a one-year program where they got a credit, they got support and tutoring. It lasted 4 years maybe, and then we were told it was going to be put on a hiatus, and then there was COVID, but it's gone. And that kind of thing is one of the concerns, is that how do you make sure the efforts you're doing, because the community partners are constantly let down when suddenly resources get withdrawn. So I think part of our ethical, moral obligation in this work is to make sure that it's always more than the person involved and the person advocating, that building institutional support so things don't just disappear. Other things, Success Beyond Limits, we worked with very closely over many years and had I think it's been a wonderful partnership. It is a group that really puts the education literature on what a successful intervention in this kind of community setting would look like. It's a model for that. They struggled for years and years for funding. I think things are now getting a bit better, but it's always a struggle, always writing research, for grants, for different kinds of things. But York has been in many ways very good. The union has put in a lot of support. Mo, if he wants to go into some of the problems, it has not been an easy road. But one of the things that came out of it is once more students from Jane and Finch are going on to post-secondary, coming to York. How do we build a space in York? And Sylvia was, we were thrilled when she took over the directorship because she was so open to this. So we now have that space right in Central Square. Those of you that know York, it's very accessible, and it's took 20 years to get there, but it's a great resource. So I think I've probably spoken for my 5 minutes, but the one other thing I'll mention that people might be interested in is we're working on building ethical practices for research in Jane and Finch. And that's been a really important initiative because so much of the research that's been done has been exploitative, it's been extractive, it's made promises that aren't kept. And that's very much a community-driven process. But I'll leave it at that and take any questions. But thank you so much, Sylvia, for organizing this. I think it's a very important conversation.
Thank you so much, Lorna, for that brief history and very concisely done. Well done for a sociologist, I have to say. But thank you so much. It really helps to understand some of this history because for some of us who've come into the space a lot later, you see these things and you really, sometimes you're not aware of all of the struggles that have gone on before for, something as simple as the hub and that space, for instance. So thank you for that. And we'll return to that question of ethical practices for research in the Jane and Finch community later. I'll now turn things over to Mohamed to share his opening remarks.
Hi, everyone. And thank you so much, Sylvia, for the invitation, and really happy to be here. And of course, Lorna, thanks for providing that history and that background. I'd be more than happy to share a bit more about who we are and what we do. So Success Beyond Limits is a community-based organization focused on educational attainment. We do this through year-round programming, reducing barriers young people face in
Mohamed, if you can hear me, you are muted. You just went off. I don't know if it's just a video problem. Okay.
I'm so sorry. Sorry, Sylvia. So my audio is going back and forth between my wireless and my laptop. Talk about technology, right? Hold on, give me 1 second. Okay. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, so I spoke a bit about the summer program, but it includes a summer transition program that happens on the York University campus for grade 8 students, providing them their first high school credit. What that means is young people are able to obtain a high school credit before entering high school. Our program also includes operating a unique youth space within a local high school dedicated to supporting and advocating for youth during the school year. Our work is what we call hyperlocal with a system focus. What that means is we meet the needs of our young people by supporting them academically and socially along their educational journey through various programs while advocating for them within systems of power, right? Those systems of power are, like education, the criminal justice system, or even housing. We found that those systems intersect in a child's life as they experiencing challenges in education. So when we're working with young people, we're noticing as they need support in education, that their challenges not just intersect with their experience in education, but maybe housing, their lives at home, maybe with the criminal justice system, child welfare system, and supporting them in all those spaces in a holistic way when looking at education and what education means for young people, especially from our community. And I know that Lorna spoke a bit about the GNF Social Innovation Hub, but we were really excited to really recently open up that new space. And this space is in collaboration with UFA. Sorry, give me 1 second. I just realized my camera was off the whole time. So everyone's hearing my lovely voice, but not seeing my incredible face, right? I'm kidding. Okay, so Lorna talked about the hub and it's amazing space. It's in partnership with UFA Community Projects, the Department of Sociology, the Resource Center for Public Sociology, and the TD York Community Engagement Center. And we know that this space is dedicated to students who are from the local GNFH area and are attending York. And the hub, was created as a response to the GNFH students and York University, and in conversations that Lorna spoke about when they had a large community gathering, but also in spaces within our space with some of our young people, when they talked about what that space could mean for them. A space where they could gather, a space where they can build stronger connections, a space where they can foster mentorship, have access to resources to support their studies, and continue to build their leadership skills, right? So many of the students who have been through our program have felt, very supported during their secondary studies, but felt the need for additional supports as they navigate post-secondary education. And this space is dedicated to doing just that, right? We're hoping that it can grow, it could, build into something that can look similar to the work that we're doing in the local high school. So that space in the local high school is supporting young people from grade 8 to grade 9, 10, 11, 12, and throughout those years, right? And when young people have felt that type of support and then go into a space, a post-secondary space where they feel that support definitely needs to continue, right? And understanding what that continuation looks like, I think is important to really identify and hone in. And I feel that, York has been doing an incredible job in understanding that work, right? It definitely, like what Lorna said, again, it took a long road to get here. But I think, that work is there and it's happening and it needs to deepen, right? Like we continue to have a long-standing partnership with York in meeting our community, the needs of the community, which is also the same community that York is a part of, right? And I would say has an obligation to work closely with, whether it's in research, in practice, or even in everything in between that. I want to leave it there and pass it back to Sylvia.
Thank you so much, Mohamed, for that. I'm particularly interested maybe a bit more about the in-school supports that you provide. So when we get there, we'll ask some more questions about that. And now to our final speaker, Melissa.
Thank you for having me. So I'm coming to this work, this I guess scholar activist work, inspired by three things. The first is my family, my parents. I was privileged to grow up in a house where my father is an educator on one end of the spectrum as a high school teacher. My mother is an educator at the other end as an ECE worker. And they've always instilled a very strong importance and value of education in both myself and my siblings. And I've come to understand that those are not experiences that are available to everyone. So just even watching my dad like prepare for the school year, watching him grade papers, him explaining to me different aspects of language and talk and like how to choose the right career. And all of these things are not necessarily the same types of guidance, parental guidance that other people get. So that is one aspect that has inspired me towards creating Neighborhood Scholar. The second aspect was my surroundings. So not everybody in my immediate surroundings has formal academic knowledge. They are what I would call like street scholars, right? So they're very knowledgeable about life, but it's really just based off of the things that they've encountered throughout their time and their journey. But I found that especially during the pandemic, when everything was kind of shut down and you couldn't get access to spaces and people were wondering, well, what's going on when it comes to criminal justice or education, or how is the pandemic affecting different things? A lot of people were reaching out to me. A lot of people who know that I've been in school for a very long time and have a certain level of knowledge were really asking, well, what do you think about this? What's your take on what's going on? What's your recommendations for how to deal with COVID transmissions in the prisons and things like that? And that is where the idea of Neighborhood Scholar came from. Me recognizing that I am playing a part in the community as a scholar for individuals who may not have access to the same types of knowledge that I regularly have access to. And then also I am inspired to do this work just by my experiences as an academic, as a Black woman in academia. It hasn't always been easy. There have been many challenges when it comes to getting support, mentorship, even understanding how to navigate my way into and then through post-secondary studies. And a lot of the things that I've come to know and understand, I figured out on my own, just from observing and watching how things happen in these spaces. And then also learning from other racialized people in these spaces that they were having similar types of experiences. Also learning from my first year students who I teach Intro to Sociology. I teach for Intro to Sociology for the past 4 years. So me also recognizing that I'm not seeing a lot of racialized students in this course, especially not young Black men. A lot of young Black females, but not really young Black men. And when they are in these courses, they're not participating as much as everybody else. And their work is not reflecting that they don't understand, but the confidence just isn't there for them to engage like the other students are engaging. And so I just kind of felt like, who better than me with all of the knowledge and insights and life experiences that I've had to kind of, I guess, play a part in making university not just more accessible, but also less frightening for racialized people, young people in my community.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for that, and particularly also for touching on the pandemic, because that's one of the things that, interestingly, we are still holding a lot of things over Zoom in part because of it, but in some other ways, because it now seems like a while back since we were at the height of things, there's a tendency to almost forget that, the pandemic also really did shift a lot of things. So thank you for highlighting that and, and talking about your journey to Neighborhood Scholar. So I'll come back to you all with questions that you can answer, but also at this point, I would like to open it up to the floor for anyone who wants to ask questions to our panelists or who has experiences to share as well with us. But just for the three of you, I wanted your insights or experiences on what it has been like for you in terms of how you build accountability into these processes of working with various communities and building partnerships. What does accountability look like, and what does an ethical relationship look like in the work that you do? And this is when I wait for someone to volunteer before I'll go back to Lorna. Oh, no, so Mohamed, thanks.
No worries. I'd be more than happy to start. So for us, I think what accountability looks like is on the other end. Well, there's two ends of it. One from the institution, like your university, for example, and the other end, which is from community. What it looks like from community, I think, is commitments, right? And making clear lines between what commitment looks like, right? From a community perspective, what commitment looks like when it's not met, what it looks like when it is met, right? Ensuring that the accountability is directly connected with the realities, right, of what happens, right? So when an institution is having conversations with community, whether it's around research, whether it's around practice, whether it's around anything, right? But it's important for both sides to really have an understanding of what that relationship could look like. And more importantly, what that relationship used to look like in the past, right? So when we're coming into spaces, there's always going to be a history in that space, right? There's always going to be people who have knowledge of that history. There's always going to be people who may not have knowledge of that history. So it's really important for both parties to really be on the same page about that, right? And be going in the same direction. Sometimes that's challenging when there's constant change in leadership, right? And it just doesn't have to be in spaces like institutions, but it can be in other spaces, right? It's challenging when there's no recognition of what has happened, no understanding of what can happen. But the successes that have come from it, right, are when people really see the impact, right? And sometimes that impact can be seen by the individual, right, who we're having a conversation with, what their involvement in these spaces have looked like historically, what their colleagues' involvements have looked like. But I think from the end that I'm speaking with, it's really important to understand the history, the future of where things can go, right, and of course being on the same page from the jump.
I'd follow up on that and say that's a very really succinct and good way to talk about accountability. And I would share everything you just said. I think is from the point of view coming in as a university researcher, though, I really feel accountability is first and foremost to the community. And that's a lot of that goes into spaces, absolutely the recognition of history, of past betrayals. I mean, there's no sugarcoating this, of an embedded power differential that can't just be talked away. But what I found a lot of this was done through youth for community projects, was going into spaces and really listening, being told what kind of research needs to be done, what projects need to be evaluated, what grants can we work on, how do we advocate on needs that are identified by the community, that it really is engaged. Community are driving this, and we're trying to, in whatever ways possible, use the resources that we have and the resources that we hope we can get from the university to apply into community spaces. And some of that's as simple as material support, financial support. Other times it is things like evaluating programs and using those evaluations, which become instrumental in getting renewal of funding or even generating funding. Making sure that the research goes back to the community, the findings of the research, and then it's used it's disseminated in ways that are accessible, that it's used to inform policy or programs or interventions in ways that are really directed through the community. And that's often been a big issue, is how research is done and then how it becomes accessible to the community itself, and how the community decides how some of those findings are used. So I would just say listening and being aware of what those power differentials are, because they can't be talked away, and it's messy. There's it's not one community that speaks with one voice. There's multiple communities in many different spaces, but certainly in Jane and Finch, and how we're engaging coming from a university that occupies a big geographical space and has many resources that could be used in very productive ways in the community, and how we don't want to over promise, but really work and advocate within the university to make it more responsible and reciprocal in its relationship with its community.
Yeah, that was great. I just wanted to add, like, I am extremely grateful for the work that has already been done by organizations like SBL, in the Jane and Finch community in particular, because you all have kind of like made my job a little bit easier when it comes to doing things in East Scarborough and Durham region, and also pushed me to hold myself to a certain level of accountability, right? When I'm going out into the community, although I have a sociological background, it's a constant reminder that it has to be community led. So even reaching out to East Scarborough storefront and just letting them know about the organization, who I am, what it is that I'm trying to do, like they reached out to their youth group and had their youth group let me know what can I do for you? With all of the knowledge that I have, how can I help you all? And that's where the social justice and the social world program that we have came from. It wasn't me. I didn't create it for myself. I created it based off of what the young people in the Kingston Galloway community were saying, like, we want to be able to mobilize our communities. We want to be able to do more in the community, but we don't necessarily know how to do that. So can you guide us through that process? So I think that for those of us as academics who are going into the community, and I think sometimes we get very excited about the possibility of working with community, that we can sometimes forget that it's not our place necessarily to lead the conversation and to lead the project. And we're really there to be a guide for them in the direction that they feel that they want to go for their community.
Okay, thank you so much for addressing that issue, and especially talking about commitment, but more importantly about history, and also assessing impact of our work. And I think there's a question in the chat that I will go to, which also accesses or addresses this issue of what challenges are. So the question is, what do you find the greatest challenge is with bridging the Ivory Tower and the community? And two, how do we as researchers ensure that we are impacting these communities in ways that they themselves find impactful? And that question is from Anika.
Those are good questions. Sylvia, can you just repeat the first question?
So the first one is, what do you find to be the greatest challenge in bridging the Ivory Tower with the community? And the follow-up is, how do we as researchers ensure that we are impacting these communities in ways that they themselves find to be impactful?
I can respond.
Okay, you go first.
I think the greatest challenge from what I've observed is mostly on like the academic side, where we tend to, I guess, act as if the knowledge that is shared through academic spaces belongs to academia. You know, like I've always felt as though the barrier between community and the university should be permeable. Like knowledge should be able to filter in and knowledge should be able to filter out freely. It shouldn't be on the basis of tuition, right? Because not everybody is able to access these spaces. So, and at the same time, there are individuals in the community who don't have formal academic training, but have a wealth of knowledge and intellect and insight just based off of their lived experiences alone, right? So I think for me, that is the biggest challenge, that there isn't as much of a respect from academia when it comes to the knowledges that are produced organically within the community. But then it's also necessary to recognize, like, even when it comes to Black feminist theories, like they started in community just based off of Black women's lived experience. So there's always value in the things that people have gone through. For the second part of the question, what was it again? Let me see. Sorry.
So the second part is, how do we ensure that, projects that we are finding are impactful, or what's the assessment of making sure that these things are impactful to communities themselves?
I think it definitely comes back to allowing the community to lead, and not taking up too much space, and to recognize that they know what they're talking about, right? They may not necessarily have the tools to do the work that needs to be done, but that's where our job comes in, because we know how to conduct research. We know how to gather data. We know how to analyze. We know the different programs that are available in order to analyze data. They may not have access to that information, but it's just to make it available. If like, teaching doesn't only happen within the structure of school, right? Within the structure of a university building. It can happen anywhere. So we take what it is that we've learned and we can transfer that back into the community. And in that way, you are empowering them now to either continue on doing this work on their own, or maybe even trying to access more information by applying to university themselves.
Yeah, and just to build off of what Melissa is saying, I hope it's okay that I interject, but when thinking about access to information, I think about one of the challenges is access to relationships, right? The type of relationships that we've, as an organization, as a community organization, built with an institution like your university has been incredible, right? The type of projects and partnerships that we were able to connect with, like, folks from, engineering, folks from faculty of education, sociology, some of those incredible relationships that we're able to turn into programming opportunities, turn into projects with some of our young people, only came from having access to maybe somebody else that maybe felt that, hey, this person would be great to speak with, who can support you in that, right? Not everyone has access to those relationships, right? Not everyone can make those connections. And I think there's times where, those spaces can really be divulged a bit more, right? Fleshed out a bit more. And I think, that's one of the huge challenges to bridging that, to answer your question, Anika. And in terms of impacting communities and knowing that, I think one is, like, I guess, conducting research that community residents can use is important, right? Can have as a tool for, like, advocacy when fighting for change. So when we're in spaces, whether it's, challenges with, the city of Toronto, or we're having conversations with other spaces where we need research to back up certain things, right? It'd be amazing for communities to have those pieces as a tool, or even, just sharing or showing the amazing success that the community has already achieved, right? Or maybe even being able to highlight what the potential achievement can look like, right? So those resources, I think, are really important, right? But community, like what everyone else is saying, community needs to be integral within the research, right? From start and to finish. So we incorporate, like, so at an SPL, what we do is we incorporate youth voice in the work that we do. So it's integral in our design, is integral in our delivery. And I think it needs to be the same way when it comes, when it's connected to research or is coming from an institution.
Yeah, I would absolutely echo what both Melissa and Mo have said. It's one of the challenges I find is the community moves much faster than the university. So it gets frustrating. So, I'll give you a concrete example, reopening the hub. We just started and then COVID hit, but trying to get it reopened at a time that we identified was really critical for students. It took Sylvia, the chair of sociology, we were in so many meetings, and on a personal level, you really feel like you're letting down the community. Like, you think this is in place, we've got it there. I feel like a fool. Like, we said we were going to open it. The dean keeps saying we can't. We've had different examples of things like that when we worked with we took as a very strong principle that when we were Youth and Community Projects was funding, anti-poverty work, at least the people that I was working with in the committee at that time, that we wanted to give financial support with no strings attached, that this wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was really important to say, you're doing, social movement organizing. We want to support that. If you need the money for childcare or for food or for TTC passes, we don't need receipts. Being able to maintain that small thing, we're talking $5,000, not a huge amount of money. It's just an incredible fight because it doesn't fit into the model of financial accountability of the university. So I think you really need a relationship with communities so you can explain, not make excuses for, but a really frank and open conversation. And they're the most rewarding, I think, on both sides. In terms of the impact, I think you really have to listen to community there. You can, Success Beyond Limits has been an enormous success, but even when it was an enormous success until, I don't know, one would know better, but just the fights to get the school buses it was just incredible when there was so much documentation of how successful, what a model it was for what research was advocating. So but I think in terms of the impact, it's listening to what community says, how the research is being used, because what appears to maybe not working, sometimes we found that isn't true. It actually is working. And the opposite is also true. Something that sometimes looks like this became a huge success. I will go to, there are many examples of that. On the surface, it looked like a success, but the community really had feedback on how it wasn't quite working, what else could be done or what needed to be done. And you just don't have, that's, what Melissa was talking about, that's the kind of insider knowledge, the community-based knowledge that doesn't matter as a York University researcher, how much you're there, you're not going to get it. You need to listen carefully and then take that back.
Thank you so much for that. And there's this question, and I'll go to the question that Laurie has posed after this particular question. But there's something that keeps coming up in the discussions, and I just want to push that a little bit more. When we talk about community, or when you talk about community leadership, that this has to be community-led, that it has to really be informed by community. I'm curious, concretely, what does that mean in each of the areas that you work? And you point to some of it where you identify need, or where someone, Melissa, in your case, people actually approach you, and Mohamed, in your work, especially in the school support system, you do hear from what is led. But what I'm curious about is what happens then when there is this, when there are conflicts between what institutions require and need and will support for on the one hand, and what communities are asking for on the other hand. So beyond the dialogue, beyond well, this is what is happening, what do you do in those cases where there's a bit of conflict or tension, and your work, it's wholly, in the case of Mohamed and Lorna, are dependent on the institution support and the rest of it. How do you navigate those kinds of tensions? And I'll go to Laurie's question after this particular one. So
to answer pretty quickly, we just keep pushing, right? Straight. So we just keep pushing that, pushing the conversation, and I think pushing the point of intersection, right? And really getting that message across, right? That this is not something that an institution is doing for a community, or a community, what community is doing for an institution, right? But a conversation that this is what needs to happen, right? And trying to get to a point where we figure out how that could happen, right? How that could look like, and it may not look like exactly how we want it to look like in year one, right? But knowing that, having that plan for year 2, year 3, and so on and so forth, right? But I think that the biggest part, besides just pushing for it, is it really needs to be the right people, right? On both ends, whether it's from the end of the institution, it needs to be the right person, right? Whether it's the end from community, and it needs to be the right folks, right? But I think to really answer that, what we've been doing when that happens is we just keep pushing forward, right? And making the case showing it, clear examples of what success looks like, right? And what it can look like when the support is mutual.
Yeah, I would amplify that. When we've run into with our union, when there were questions, one point about funding, we're trying to figure out how, we're saying this is such a success. And we thought, well, let's show them the success. So we, pushed to get space at an annual meeting. We brought in students from SBL. We brought in anti-poverty activists that we were working at, and that carried the funding we needed for several years after that, because once the membership saw kind of with their own eyes, their own conversation, we had a lot more support that we could, but you just push, you have to keep on pushing, finding different relationships, going at it different ways. I think a lot of the success we've had and what we've been able to do in sociology is, having a supportive chair, having a very supportive director of the center, and keep going. You just can't give up. You find different ways, strategize different ways. And we tried everything from praise to embarrassment to, we haven't camped at the president's office yet, but it, at the end of the day, a lot of it comes through and some of it doesn't, but it just is, you really have to be, have a kind of, I don't know, whole mentality in the way you just keep going at it.
I think that's where, like what Mo was saying, where it has to be the right like person or people comes in, because it's not easy work. There is a lot of bureaucracy, there is a lot of red tape. You are gonna have people who are not necessarily gonna see the vision, and it's very easy for individuals to burn out because you're putting so much into it and it's just not, it's like you don't understand why they can't see it. Like, why can't you guys see that this is beneficial to the community? Everyone else can see it. So it really has to be people who are truly doing it for the right reasons, with the right intention, and truly committed to community, because it's sometimes it can be a very long road. Like, I am very new to this, so I'm looking up to like SBL to get to their level one day, and I'm already facing challenges just with the programs that I'm running in the elementary school in Durham, where you get to a point, you kind of hit a wall where everyone has done their part. The youth have come up with these great research projects. They have done their research protocol. They have fantastic surveys. The principal is supportive, but then when you go to the board, it's like roadblock. So it's not a smooth road at all to not only developing these partnerships, but also to getting to the end of the research projects that you have in mind.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it also is trailblazing, right? So when we first started our organization and being able to offer credits to students over the summer, the Toronto District School Board told us that that can happen, right? I don't think that you can get students to be dedicated to a 6-week-long intensive summer program, especially the type of students that we were looking towards. So we were looking at students who were transferred to grade 9 rather than being promoted to grade 9, right? So the Toronto School Board, was telling us, so you're telling me that there's, students who didn't do so well in grade 8 who are not showing up for a class, but they're going to show up for your summer program every single day, all day for most of the summer. And we're like, yeah, it's going to happen, right? So the test run was, okay, we'll let you offer maybe half of a credit. And then we'll look at, the students getting that other half of credit during the school year. But when we've seen the success of it and the growth of it, now that we're able to deliver a full credit in the summertime, not just that, but there's, 13, 14, 15 plus agencies across the city who are now offering credits to grade 8 students before they enter high school, right? The Toronto School Board is running their own programming that also offers that same thing, right? When in the past, the conversation was, we don't think that can happen, right? And that's just for credits. There's a whole other conversation when we entered the space of being able to offer co-op credits and having young people be employed, students being employed in the summertime and not having to choose between a summer job and also summer school, right? But being able to do both at the same time was a new conversation, right? Until that was trailblazed as well too, where now it's just common standard. It's just a common thing, right? It's like, why not? Like, why can we not do that, right? But I think it's really important to be able to get to that type of space. And again, understanding the history that is connected to that.
Okay. At this stage, I will be pausing the recording so that we can have a more community engagement in this conversation, so that we can have questions, and I'm sure other people may be able to jump in as well, but I'll just be pausing the recording. So we've come to this place where I'd just like to ask what your final words are or comments are on this particular session before you close. So I'll start with Mohamed, please.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, and really happy to be part of this conversation and engage with everyone here. I think when I think about our conversation today, I think about accountability, right? I think about accountability and how important that is, how trust and ethical research relationship and how important that can be. But that that happens through strong partnerships, deepened engagement. And this can only be done, I guess, by building with community through research, through advocacy, and actual practice, right? We talked about earlier, I mentioned earlier about, becoming a familiar face is important, right? And this can be done when we have access to relationships and resources, which is huge. So I'd like to encourage everyone in this space, and a reminder for everyone here too, and myself, that this, research, or the right research needs to happen. The right research can't happen unless the right relationships exist, right? And the right relationships can exist unless there's access, equitable access for everyone. But I wanted to leave it there, and thank you, Sylvia, for this opportunity.
Thank you. I'll go to Melissa and then Lorna.
Yeah, also thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm very, as I keep saying, inspired by Mo and everything that he's doing with SBL. And I think that for me, with starting this organization, what's been very helpful is having the support of, professors like Sylvia and like Lorna, who can be mentors to me, and connect me with people like Mo, who can help me to guide the organization in the right direction. I know that working with community and helping my community in particular in East Scarborough and Durham region is something that is very important to me, but I also want to make sure that it's kind of being done in a way that whatever it is that I am helping to bring to those communities is sustainable. I don't want it to be that I'm in and then I'm out. It's important to me that I'm able to leave the community better than I found it, that I'm able to empower the community through the knowledges and the tools that I have gained through my education. And just through this conversation, I am encouraged to continue on the journey towards doing that. So thank you all for all of the insight and the opportunity again.
I'd also like to thank you, Sylvia, for organizing this, and Melissa and Mohamed for your contributions. I think we need more conversations like this. I think we all need to throw our support behind the Resource Center for Public Sociology. I think it can really make a difference. I think it could be a hub, a central place for doing this kind of research, building these kinds of connections. Physical space is very important in being able to gather and do things. I think it's great, and I'm very appreciative of the direction you've taken the center in, Sylvia, and I think we should all come out and support it. Come and visit the hub. It's very exciting. And I'll also put in a plug for unrelated, our graduate students. Our symposium is tomorrow. Our students have worked very hard on it. This is a graduate program. So any of you that are in any way connected with that, please come out and support our graduate students, many who are interested in doing work like this.
And it's tomorrow in the sociology department. If you get lost, just come to that big place in Ivory Hall and ask anyone. It will be in there, and it's a whole day affair. I just wanted to say thank you so much to all three of you for agreeing to come, and to the people who've decided our audience for indulging us and participating in our conversations. We are going to have another conversation, another global public sociology conversation focused on women and women's rights in Afghanistan on the 21st of March. So stay tuned for that. If you haven't registered, please register. But the takeaways that I've taken from this conversation are that we keep pushing and that we stayed committed to the work and the values of social justice. Ethical relationships are very important. We need to start sustainable projects, and that we can strategize through praise and shaming when necessary. So thank you all for spending your afternoon with us, and we'll see you again. And I also want to say thank you so much to Susan Foster. We call her Sue, but you often see her emails, and she's Susan Foster. We have concepts, we have ideas, but until Sue makes all of this possible. So I just want to say thank you to Sue for all the work you do in making it very easy sometimes to organize events. So have a good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.